Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. All right, I'm so happy to be here with Stephanie, and you are from Gorham, Maine, which is one of my all-time favorite places on earth.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
For the reason of a place we're going to talk about in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But first, so you're a board member for the National Council for the Social Studies. Tell me a little bit about that. How did you get involved as a board member?
Yeah, hi Eric. I'm Stephanie Nichols. I am actually a second grade teacher. I live and I work in Gorham, Maine. Funny enough, so we're at the Boston NCSS conference. I was here my first year of teaching 10 years ago, and that was my first NCSS experience, really, and I just could not believe that something like this existed. I didn't know before then, and it's just so funny how much I feel like my life changed. So I am currently, so I got involved with just joining NCSS, learning about it, and then as that went, my confidence built a little bit, and then I decided to run for the board of directors for the elementary representative. I was teaching 8th grade U.S. history, and then I moved down to 2nd grade, 5th grade and then 2nd grade, and I just realized how incredibly important elementary social studies is, and how incredibly important that groundwork, that foundation is.
As a high school social studies teacher, I can absolutely confirm that.
Yeah.
Because it's your job as a social studies teacher at the lower grades eventually comes to us.
Exactly.
And if the preparation is not quite there, it shows. And when it is there, it absolutely makes our life so much easier, right?
Well, thank you so much. No, 100%. That perspective was so interesting because I had worked at the high school level, taught 8th grade in middle school, and then working with 5th and 2nd graders, it was like, oh my gosh, yeah. As an 8th grade teacher, I'd be like, well, what do you mean about these having conversations and, sort of like dialogue? And I realized just how much of that groundwork and foundation is laid in elementary. And it's just so fun. They love it. I love it.
Because they learn at a pretty young age things like place, their environment around them, social skills, and that's really what we're about here. Our president, Jeff Bork, is absolutely, his mission, his goal for our council is to reinforce this idea of we're social studies teachers. Mm-hmm. We need to be social. We need to encourage people being more social. Mm-hmm. Going back to what you said about the NCSS, and I see other board members here too.
Yes.
It's funny, we're on the 104th conference, and it's remarkable. There are some people that I've met that are like, there's such a thing as that. I'm like, it's 104 of these.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly it's been around for a while, and
yes.
we could look at the NCSS as its own primary source of documentation, I assume, of 104 years ago, right?
It is, yeah, and we actually, NCSS does have archives as well. I believe they're housed at UT Austin, right? I think our archives are housed at UT Austin. So we do have NCSS archives even, which are really exciting, and that's something that, we have an archives committee and a group that's focused on archives for us as well.
If there was ever an organization that would recognize the value of archiving and preserving and holding on to things for better preparation for the future would be NCSS, right?
You got it.
It'd be ridiculous if you're like, I wouldn't need to throw it out.
Exactly.
It's all gone. So where do you feel, and you have two perspectives. One is like an elementary school teacher, and also now as a council social studies board of director. What is the state of social studies education right now?
So, I mean, I think about the work with our, I also teach a section of elementary social studies methods, and I kind of think with my pre-service teachers, and I think of the things I'm hearing from them about going into a classroom. I mean, I've been teaching for 10 years, and anybody in education knows things change so much, and you just expect that. But I think there is a lot of worry. I think there's a lot of concern with teaching. Is anything, the concern, is it a contentious topic, right? And I think, though, Jelani Memory last year in Nashville had an incredible quote. He said, "The kids are ready." And I just think in social studies, I'm seeing, from my perspective as an elementary person, a lot more recognition of how important and valuable elementary level social studies is, and really just helping teachers feel more confident with teaching, everything is a primary resource. I think everything is social studies, and just helping them recognize that. I do think there is growing momentum for elementary social studies, and I think it's giving teachers a little more confidence who are elementary teachers and might not feel like they're necessarily a social studies expert, but they are. And I think it's helping them feel more confident. So, I mean, I think the state is stating.
Because sadly, it is a field, I guess education in general is one that is suffering from a lot of people not turning to it.
Yep.
Programs that train teachers are, just anecdotally, are at low points. I don't know the exact statistics, but it seems like, unless we're talking about traditional teacher training schools, there's not a lot of people coming around to that. So I guess to be an encourager to people, saying, and I'm assuming, does the concern come from getting a negative reaction to something that you teach? Accusations of, I'm indoctrinating the kids, or I'm putting too much of my own viewpoints into my lessons. Yeah, no, for sure. I think and also, so then coming from NCSS, coming from Maine, coming from New England, I'm very fortunate and privileged, I realize, to work in a district that's very supportive of social studies and elementary civics. In Maine, we have ranked choice voting, and nobody thought twice about my classroom doing a ranked choice voting lesson and doing activities, getting I voted stickers. They actually put it into practice. But I forget sometimes that's me as a Maine teacher, but then being in the NCSS board of directors, with some of our, it's not as simple or easy as it is in maybe some other states where that would be a lot more contested than it is. So it's a really good check for me as a board member to remember that when I'm thinking of things, sometimes it comes from that privilege of being in a state and a district where I'm allowed to do that. It's an ultimate kind of check-in or reflection of, here we are at a national conference. All of us, most of us here would describe ourselves as the same thing. We're social studies teachers. But what that means in your specific location,
exactly,
and the surroundings, culturally, philosophically, politically, all the different things that we teach as social studies teachers. And so, in some ways, it's almost like we are designed to be guides for our students.
It is, and I think one of the things that, and I speak from my work on NCSS, but it is a priority, certainly, that we're supporting those teachers as well. And so, I know there's work on things like a rapid response toolkit, things that teachers can say when or if, they have lessons or content that's contested, and ways that you can respond to that. NCSS wants to support that work in classrooms and be that resource for teachers to say, hey, we're here to help.
And I guess in some way or another, it's always been that way, right? And CSS does stand for that. It just, the climate might be different from decade to decade as far as what that kind of support really means.
Exactly.
So I appreciate your insights on that.
Yeah, thank you
now
so
let's
much.
talk about the pop culture stuff.
Okay.
So I mentioned
excited.
before, Gorham is the place to be. It's the capital of the world, in my opinion, because it has
Goodwill Buy the Pound.
The bins.
The bins. It's an incredible experience. It is not for the faint of heart. I took my mom once, and she just was like, I have to go sit in the car. I can't. I'm not built for this.
So let's describe to the listening audience what the Goodwill Buy the Pound experience is.
Okay, so Goodwill Buy the Pound it's almost sort of like a warehouse with these really big bins, and they're on wheels, and you go in and you just kind of like rifle through. There's no real rhyme or reason in terms of like categories. Like when you go to a Goodwill, you've got like, homeware and stuff like that. But this, it's just you pick. You are a Goodwill thrifting archaeologist.
They have about, it's 8-foot long tubs.
Yep.
And they kind of like along the periphery, they have the clothes, and then there's shoes. But even those two things can find themselves in the middle part all the time. And it's just everything that Goodwill can't sell at their retail stores for a designated amount of time. And then they sell it by the pound.
Yep. And so the one in Goodwill as well. So what they'll do is this like alarm goes off. And at first I thought it was like a fire alarm or something. But what they do is you have to stand behind these tape lines. And what they do is the employees come out and they switch out the bins. So they're constantly like almost like rotating the stock basically. And then as soon as they're situated, people just, it is like Black Friday on like another level. They just head and go.
If Antiques Roadshow had a mosh pit, that's what it would be like. And they got rid of the alarm thing. But it's like an unspoken, you can always spot the newcomers.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're still like going through the bins, and everyone's like, you have to be behind the red line.
Like,
okay.
Oh, yeah, and then they will tell you, no, if you're new.
People set up their carts on the side as their home bases. Once it ends up in a blue cart, nobody can touch it, right? You've claimed it, and it's like an honor system kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Why did they make it? Why do you think, and what does that say about our modern era? It's a pretty modern thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question. I technically do not know the answer, but for me, I feel like, I mean, there are always questions now about us as a consumer society and just the overflow. But I think, I think first, it's a charity, so I'm sure they're going to do any last-ditch attempts they can to make money for the charity, of course. But I don't know. I don't know.
So I was fortunate enough to take the tour this summer.
Oh, okay.
And they give a history of the organization and their mission statements, everything like that. And one of the reasons why they made this is because it's very expensive for them just to throw things out.
Oh,
so
my
because
gosh.
of not just in Maine, but I guess nationally,
Yep.
you can't just bring it to the landfill. They have so much stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's a huge impact on that.
Yep.
So they find every way other than throwing it away. So I guess that shows us, to me, that is very revealing of the modern era because you're a New Englander, I'm a New Englander. I don't know if you've ever snooped on your property and found where people were throwing their stuff out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Pre-1960s.
Yeah, so where I live in Gorham, it's funny, actually. My husband and I, we bought our house. We're right on the border with South Windham, so it's was a traditionally farming kind of rural area. And we found in our backyard, all of a sudden, I'm like, there's an old sink out here. There's a bike. And it was like under all these leaves. And I just said to my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh. And our neighbor had said, this was kind of like a
trash bin.
Like a trash bin area.
And I was sink in a sinkhole. That's pretty perfect.
A sink
actually.
in a sinkhole. Yeah. I was like,
a sinking suspicion about that.
I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, is somebody hiding stuff? Like, are we,
am I going to find bones soon?
Right. I was like, so much true crime. I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, no, absolutely. somebody's like, oh, a bike's missing. I'm like, did you check in our yard? There's that one. I don't know if it's somebody's.
That's what they do with it.
Yeah. Yep.
So in its own way, I guess Goodwill by the Pound and similar things is a gestation of, I mean, just the thrift store experience in its own right, even before you get to Goodwill by the Pound, is such a reflection of, it's a continuation of, well, we are a disposable society. Something stops working, you don't get it go fixed. You don't go to get it fixed, you replace it.
Right.
But you can't just junk.
Right.
That's taboo, right? You don't want to just
right.
throw your crap out into the yard or into even if it's a designated spot. So you donate it.
Yep.
You know, yard sales don't go the way you want them to.
Right.
Hey, bring it to Goodwill.
Exactly.
Goodwill's become like a verb.
Yeah, yes. For me, it's always the thing I have in my mind, for sure. Like, what do I do with this? I don't wear it. I'll just send it to Goodwill. It's fine. And we'll keep the bag in the back of the car for like 4 months before I finally get there.
Oh, I know. I feel like if you just went throughout New England, you would see basically the same arrangement of garage full of stuff, except for a car.
100%. No.
And bags for Goodwill that sit there for a while and then eventually get there.
Yep.
But once it's there, you know it's doing good, right? That's the idea behind it.
Exactly.
Even if they can't get, and so ultimately, like, the end result for a lot of the clothing, and in that Goodwill in particular, there's a lot of, because Portland's right close by, I guess there is a lot of immigrant community from Africa.
Yep.
And what they'll do in many cases is collect clothes and shoes and send it to family across the ocean. And so more recycling, more good that's being done. It's not just for people like myself. One question that does come up, and I've thought about it recently, is, am I keeping somebody else? Because I don't need a lot of the stuff.
Right.
But when you've been to Goodwill by the Pound, do you get the sense that most of the people there are collectors more than they are, I need clothes for my family?
Well, it's so funny you say that, because I hadn't been in a long time. I really enjoyed it before COVID, actually. And then I went like a month or so ago with my mom, and I hadn't been since before COVID. And it was so interesting to me. You know, I saw a huge mix of both, actually. But I was so surprised with the amount of people that I think were like running to find like, you know, popular name brand things to resell. I think reselling has become really popular. And I do think the more I kind of learn, I do think, there's a lot. And that helped. Same on my side. It shifted my thinking a lot. So now when I go, I'm like, what can I get? Because I teach second grade. And I'm like, well, what can I get to have for school, or in case a kid needs, or, you know, extra whatever. So
to bring this full circle, my first stop whenever I go to Goodwill by the Pound is their books.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I love finding textbooks or other. My wife, who's a librarian, a school librarian, she tries to find as many books for her library as she can. Yeah. But I also like finding people's notebooks that they've made themselves and getting those kinds of insights on what we talked about before.
Yeah.
Kind of like, this is a time capsule of what education has looked like. Yep. And now this is education, is finding the debris from all that and presenting it back to our kids and being like, look, this is the world around you.
Exactly. Well, and it's funny. Yeah, I like, you know, sometimes the photo albums or somebody's, you know, Letterman jacket. I feel like, for me, my husband is always like, Stephanie, oh my gosh, like, you have to stop. But I'm like, I feel like it's my responsibility that these people aren't forgotten.
Absolutely.
And like, that people know about them, and like, oh my gosh. And it opens up so many like existential questions. But yeah.
What's your favorite thing that you found there?
So I found some really cool vintage suitcases.
Oh, neat.
And one of them, it was really neat, and I don't remember the name, but it had like embossed initials on it, and the tag inside said it was a New England made suitcase. And I just thought it was so cool. And I found this really cool little like vintage rug that I used to put it out. I displayed it in my house because I thought it was so cool. But that was probably one of my favorites. I've also seen like high school letter jackets that are so old, and they just make me so happy.
Those are such a, because the person who got that that was at least somewhat of an important day in their life.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I feel like I just need to have these so that they know that someone's thinking of them.
You and I share the same mindset. When I go there, if I spot something that's personalized, I snatch it right up, because I know after taking the tour, they don't just throw it away.
Yeah.
But it might just end up in some wholesalers.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And they're just going to toss it themselves.
Yep.
And I don't want that to happen.
Exactly.
I think the best thing I found recently was a little girl's poems from the 1960s.
Oh my gosh.
One was titled Puddles. And
That
it was a beautiful little poem.
Oh,
Another
that
one
is
was about
so
her
special.
baby brother that was just born.
Oh my gosh.
And then I found, and so it was almost like it is being archaeologists, really, because it was like a debris field. I started with that, and then around it, I saw things like, oh, here's a postcard from when she was older. So clearly, and I learned later from doing research, she had passed away, and somebody, I assume inadvertently, brought these things to a Goodwill, because there was some photographs in there. It was just somebody's life. Was there, and I'm like, I cannot let this go.
Right.
I'll find a place for it at home.
And it's such a way to study history, because you're like, I think about working with young learners, and it's like you look at a book of poems written by a girl in the 1960s, and you're like, how much is universal for like the childhood experience, and showing kids like, you know what, like your grandparents were kids and wrote poems too, and like had some of the same feelings and thoughts as you. So I love that so much.
We're not so different.
We're not so different.
Like seeing those photographs from the Civil War.
Yes, it's, oh my gosh.
I love the candids it's the few candids you can find of Civil War era people. Because the ones that are all proper, standing.
Right.
They have their own beauty in their own way, because it's like, this person probably never had a portrait done of them before.
Exactly.
So they want this to be the best one. And they knew, especially if they're soldiers, they're taking a huge risk in their life, and they want to be remembered.
Right.
But the candids are so great, because you're like, that person, they might have big mutton chops, but they're really still just a person, just like the people around me.
Yeah, it just
and they have a
humanizes
story.
it. Yeah.
Like all of us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, someone I think of, even like, in like Joshua Chamberlain, or like, some of the famous people that we think of, but it's like, they're also people.
Yeah.
Like, these are just people doing incredible things.
Isn't there a guy that's here this weekend named Ken Burns that knows something about that?
I feel like he has,
I feel like he may have informed kind of our way of thinking about that.
I definitely had the VHS tapes of the Civil War of the Ken Burns.
And Joshua Chamberlain, he became like a minor celebrity because I always assumed it was because of the movie Gettysburg.
Yeah,
which he's, Jeff Daniels plays his. But then you watch the Civil War documentary, and they do focus on him throughout that series. So I feel like Burns may have claimed him first.
Got there first.
Another Maine.
I know.
Guys, so.
You take us out of Maine, and we're just like, oh my gosh.
Chamberlain.
We just start talking about how incredible it is.
Stephanie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And your insights.
Oh my gosh.
I hope this isn't the last time we talk.
Definitely. This was incredible. Thank you so much.
We're pretty close.
We are pretty close, yeah.
And I'll be in Gorham
anytime. I'm gonna give
within 14 days of any time period.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna give you my number, and we're gonna go together and have this experience.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything as a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.